Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Dr. Mike Leno, wrestling's premier photographer and producer and writer. Multiple.
And bon vivant.
Yes, Evan Ginsberg. And Evan, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. He is the host of Get Your Bell Rung, KG Landry. And Get Your Bell Rung Pro Wrestling Podcast is a raw, honest pro wrestling analysis from men who have lived it inside the ring. He's the passionate host driving ultimate fan debates, an old school voice and wrestling historian who has interviewed the who's who in professional wrestling. Welcome, KG Landry. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. I have to correct you. I am in no way, shape, or form a wrestling historian. I would not even put myself in that category. That's people like you, Evan, not me.
You're very humble, but that's a positive. That's a positive.
Well, look, wrestling historians could go and say, you know, WrestleMania 30, this match was the best match, or this match was the worst match. I can't tell you dates.
That's not a historian. A historian can tell you what was the undercard to Dory Funk Jr. defeating Gene Kiniski for the NWA World title in Florida.
KG,
right. See, I couldn't do that.
KG, let me ask you a question. Do you remember when pay-per-views were only one night?
Yes. 100%.
Then you're a wrestling historian.
Yes.
You know enough about wrestling then to be a wrestling historian. That's all you need. If Saturday night's main event was the only thing that was on TV at the time.
Wait a minute, Russ, you could ask him, do you remember when it was still called Saturday Night's Main Event? Because the next one is a Sunday Night's Main Event.
Yeah.
I want to know, I'm just kidding around here, if your show is named after when somebody gets a concussion or a stinger.
Myself, no. Actually, you know, it's funny. My original podcast was Ring the Damn Bell. And I found out that there's another podcast that's a wrestling podcast that's very popular called that. And I'm like, well, I don't want to get in trouble. I didn't mean to copy my name. So I changed it to Get Your Bell Rung originally. And then I was like, damn it, that's a football podcast. So then I added Get Your Bell Rung Pro Wrestling Podcast. No, it's not. It's just kind of a play on words from Ring the Damn Bell, so people were familiar with a little bit of the title. That's it. It has nothing to do with stingers or people getting...
Wait, we need to call a show Get Your Shit In Podcast.
I got to tell you, Dr. Mike, and don't hate me for saying this, but ever since I've seen you in this podcast, you remind me, your physical appearance, of Dave Meltzer.
Oh, God.
Which one of us?
I've known him longer than anybody in wrestling since 1971.
Wow. Yeah,
we helped each other with each other's
really?
newsletters. He actually did more for mine, but he was doing a California Wrestling Report, which just covered San Francisco, Northern California, Roy Shire stuff. Oh my God! Hey, I'm fucking better looking. I'm sorry.
Little known fact: Mike actually has a body underneath that head. You only see the head on the podcast, though. Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
I gotta move back in this friggin' chair.
So KG, tell me how you got, where your origin comes from professional wrestling. When did you start watching it, and who were you watching?
Oh, I started watching, I was probably about 8 years old. Mid-South Wrestling, Bill Watts, from Louisiana. I grew up watching, and then I graduated to Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS. And when I was 13, around 13 or 14, I remember we got cable, and my brother came and said, hey, check out this other wrestling show on USA, WWF. And I remember I turned it on, and I'm not hating, I'm not a hater. I'm not hating, I just know what I like, right? And I turned on WWF, and even at 13 years old, it was so cartoonish, I couldn't watch it. And I've always said, you know, Vince Russo is going to be on my podcast tomorrow morning. I have an interview with him. And I have an issue with both Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff because they both like to claim that WCW during the NWO days and WWE during the Attitude Era days was the first real reality-based wrestling. And I say bullshit. I was watching reality-based wrestling with Mid-South Wrestling, with Georgia Championship Wrestling. They were doing that stuff back then that became hot on WCW and WWE in the late 90s. But that's where I grew up on. This is why. And I know we're going to get to it. Yes, I attended SummerSlam, and I do watch WWE, but I'm more of an AEW fan because if you watch my podcast, I call WWE Sesame Street Wrestling versus AEW, I call more adult wrestling. So I lean more towards AEW, but I want both to be successful because I think that, I don't want anybody to go out of business. This tribalism amongst fans aggravates me when they want one company or the other to go out of business because there's more than just professional wrestlers. There's the camera crew. There's the backstage people. You talk about a lot of families losing jobs when you talk about someone going out of business, right? So I want everybody. I want TNA to be successful. I want everyone to be successful. But you like what you like. I prefer AEW more so than WWE at the moment, at least.
They're all flavors of ice cream. You can like all of them. You can like aspects of all of them. AEW is the only show, the two shows I never fast forward through. WWF, especially picture in picture, sometimes you can blitz right through that as fast as possible.
Yeah, I'd say people like to put them as competitors, and I guess they are, but they're so different. WWE is more story-based outside the ring, and they're better at it, to be honest with you. AEW is more of your old school. There's that storyline based outside of the ring, but they're more about telling stories inside of the ring. Back like when I was watching wrestling, you got your Ric Flair, your Four Horsemen, your Magnum TAs, your Nikolai Volkov cutting promos and that storyline, but the main story was inside the ring, and that's how AEW is versus WWE. Their main story seems to be backstage. So, again, that's why I'm more AEW than WWE.
KG, I'm going to just ask a quick question, and I'll shut up for a little while. Tell me, or tell us all and the listeners about your memories of Bill Watts Mid-South and, Georgia Championship, always championship. Who were you watching at the time?
Who's your favorite Mid-South wrestler?
Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you, I love telling a story. I don't know if you guys can remember the first time you felt real emotion watching professional wrestling. I can. The Junkyard Dog and Ted DiBiase were tag team best friends. And there's that match. I think, again, see, this is why I don't consider myself a historian. I think it was for a number one contendership, but I'm not sure. But I know that they had to face each other. And Ted DiBiase got knocked out of the ring, and as the Junkyard Dog...
I think it was for the North American title.
There you go.
I'm watching that storyline right now.
See,
I've
awesome.
been getting reacquainted with Mid-South, and so it's funny that you bring this up. I'm like, oh my God, I just saw that match like 2 weeks ago. So It's funny you bring that up.
Well, in the match, when Ted DiBiase got knocked out of the ring, the Junkyard Dog went in between the top and second rope with his head out to check, make sure Ted was okay. Again, they're buddies, and that's when Ted used the lower glove for the first time in my memory.
First time with a black glove. Yeah,
right. And knocked him out and cheated. And I can tell you that my first real emotion was disgust. I hated Ted DiBiase because the Junkyard Dog, we were kids. We loved JYD, right? And that was my first time really feeling that emotion. And then there was the incident with Skandor Akbar throwing a fireball in Hacksaw Jim Duggan's face. That was another strong.
That's when Duggan was at his best. Those guys, Duggan, DiBiase, and Doc Steve Williams, close friends. And when Bill Watts took that over, he kind of aggressively took over the territory from his boss, promoter Leroy McGurk, who was Mike McGurk's dad. Blind wrestler promoter, really incredible story. But his territory is called Mid-Southern, and when Bill Watts kind of aggressively took over the territory, he shortened it to Mid-South. Yeah,
I loved it.
What about a Georgia Championship? What was going on there? Was it Bud Sawyer, Tommy Rich?
Georgia Championship Wrestling was when I was really introduced into the Four Horsemen. Ric Flair, Bam Bam Gordy, Rowdy Piper. Those were the guys that was on TBS when I was first introduced. Matter of fact, I remember watching when Black Saturday, Vince McMahon. Again, I was no, absolutely not. but I have more memories of Mid-South than Georgia Championship Wrestling, but definitely Georgia Championship Wrestling as well. I remember the promo I will always remember from Bill Watts when he was talking about how they had a real champion, Ric Flair, versus, and he didn't specifically mention WWF to my memory, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but he said, we don't need Hollywood stars. We have the real champion. He was talking about Mr. T and Hulk Hogan back then. And I agree with him. I've never been a guy that's okay with Hollywood coming into professional wrestling. And to this day, as an adult, I have a problem with it. I really, really do. You don't see movie stars getting into a boxing ring or getting to an MMA ring, do you? So why should it be in professional wrestling?
Mickey Rourke went into boxing at the height of his fame, and it was crazy.
Mickey Rourke's different. There's always the exception to the rule, right?
Yeah,
always.
Yeah.
Mickey Rourke is a legit badass.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Your little yachties are not. And I have issues with that. But going back to Georgia Championship Wrestling, I'm trying to remember the one memory that I have. The slap heard around the world when Dusty Rhodes slapped Baby Doll, who I've had on my show a couple of times. I love the Baby Doll.
Nicola, who's the daughter of her dad and mother were great wrestlers, name wrestlers.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was the only time my dad. So the reason I got into wrestling was because of my father. That every Saturday, me and my dad watched professional wrestling. And he would always in the background, I could always hear him say, boy, if you ever hit that man that many times and he doesn't go down, it's okay to run at that point. But the one time when Dusty slapped Baby Doll, it's when he got my attention for real and said, boy, you ever touch a woman, we're going to have a problem. Other than that, it was all entertainment for me and my dad. And I'm not a very emotional guy as far as crying. My wife's always like, how can you not cry in this movie? But the last time I shed a tear for professional wrestling, believe it or not, was when Brock Lesnar took off his gloves at WrestleMania, because that was the last guy that I watched debut with my father before me and my dad. I went on to live my life. I moved away, and my dad passed away in 2008. Ric Flair is probably the one I got really emotional about, because that was my dad's guy. And when he retired, it was like my childhood, right? My childhood was done. So yeah, wrestling, it means a lot to me, but a lot of the old school stuff versus now.
It's interesting. It's interesting you bring up your dad, because I always tell people some of our greatest nights of our lives was going to wrestling with our dad or uncle or aunt or mom, grandparents, whoever it may have been. And many, many years later, they're gone. And that's part of the reason wrestling means so much to us. My dad died in 1980, and any match I saw after that, I would sit there and go, Dad would have loved this. I'm sorry he's not here. Yeah.
There's the other side of the story. My dad hated wrestling. And so I had to spend a lifetime watching it despite him, and around, I had to sneak it in and watch it when, he wasn't around, or, as soon as he would turn the corner, I'd have to turn the TV set. And this was in the days before we had televisions had remotes. So my brother loved it and I loved it. But like both my mom and my dad my dad used to watch it when he was younger. He watched Antonino Rocco and Gorgeous George and all that stuff, because it was so popular in the 50s. But then he quote unquote grew out of it, and his attitude was that we're too sophisticated, and hoity-toity to watch such blue collar entertainment. And I couldn't get enough of it. And I still can't get enough of it. But my dad never saw me or my brother perform. And that's one of sometimes it's completely opposite of what you guys experience. I just want to mention that not everybody's parents are so, gung-ho about wrestling. Sometimes
my family, it's in our DNA. My grandfather took my mother in Brooklyn, New York, to see Killer Kowalski rock a Gorgeous George in the 50s, and Killer Kowalski became my friend later in life, and she couldn't wrap her head around it. He was so mean, that this was just Mike knew him, just a warm, wonderful guy. Yeah.
There could have been a nicer guy. I continually tell people, him and the Sheik, they were just nice, but the Sheik was more protective of his gimmick. I don't think Walter gave a shit once he retired. Very quickly.
Kowalski trained generations of wrestlers. I mean, even today there are people in the ring who got trained by.
Well, they forget the Eliminators, Perry Saturn and John Cronus, besides obviously, China, Brittany Brown, obviously Triple H. There was a zillion guys, Hunter. But very quickly, my grandfather had stopped watching, and he went, at the 40s, 50s in L.A., but then I was already starting to shoot, and I took him. I had no idea that Jack Briscoe was coming in. We had this February 1973 tournament to determine the number one, guy to challenge whoever won between the Sheik, Ed Farhut, and Victor Rivera in our main event. And so they said there's going to be a tournament. I knew Terry Funk was coming, so I bring my grandfather, I put him front row. The opener is a 10-minute Broadway between Terry Funk and Jack Briscoe that was out of this world, and my grandfather raved about it. And I of course, knew Briscoe from the magazines, but that was Briscoe's debut in, I think, in California overall. Not yet, hadn't even worked for Shire yet in San Francisco. So amazing when they see that, and you see what these guys are doing in terms of performance and making it look real, particularly those territory guys. It was a great bonding thing. Evan had more of that with his own father, and it sounds like you did too.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
You brought up Jack Briscoe. KG, all you guys, do you think fans today would even understand or appreciate a Jack Briscoe versus Dory Funk, let's say 60-minute Broadway?
No, and I'll tell you why I say no. I try to make my rounds for social media and build up my podcast. And there's these kids on TikTok. I found a wrestling room, and they were talking not the best wrestlers today in WWE, the best wrestlers in history in WWE. And they didn't talk about the Terry Funks. They didn't talk about so many of your legends. And I brought this up, and they laughed at me. Well, who's that? It drives me nuts that today's wrestling fans, they think real wrestling history stops or begins with the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Is that the fans' fault, or is that WWE's fault?
No, I think it's the fans' fault because you have almost everything.
It's the WWE's fault.
No, you have almost. Wait a minute. They're putting up old episodes that people thought were long gone of Georgia Championship on YouTube. I'm talking about after Vince, out of the picture. But there's so much shit on YouTube that fans can, if they want to learn history, if they want to see rock matches.
WWE doesn't relish it. The WWE doesn't look back. You could say the Hall of Fame stuff, but we see how with the Hall of Fame, it's 90 minutes for Stephanie and 90 seconds for someone like Bad News Allen. Bad News Brown. It gets 90 seconds.
Yeah, I understand that. I think, though, a big part of the problem, back whenever I was a kid, there was wrestling magazines. And in these wrestling magazines that we rushed to get constantly, they would go back 20, 30 years and talk about the history and the guys before the people we're watching now. Fans just go to social media now. That's it. They have no interest in actually going and pick up a magazine and actually.
But that's perpetuating stupidity. The magazines were not only our bond in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but like you said, they educated us. Like Stanley Weston mags. I've never called them after mags, and I've worked for them since the 70s. Stanley Weston created that. He created the first Wrestling Review. The original in 1959 was a huge bestseller with the Graham Brothers on the cover.
Every week the WWE has like 9 to 12 hours of programming that it has. And doesn't spend any time, going back and looking at some of the classic matches. And I know
so for their tributes, they didn't put a video package for Dory Jr. You had to go online. They at least did a good one that Vic Joseph emceed. I just wanted to ask KG before I forget and brain fart. How do you manage all of the stuff that's on TV every night? From 2.5 to sometimes 3 hours of Raw, Tuesday nights NXT, Wednesday AEW, Saturday AEW, Friday SmackDown, Thursday, TNA, Saturday night
I
after.
watch almost none of it. That's
Yes,
how I
what you
manage.
Saturday's
You know what?
Triple A,
That
and we're not
is-
talking streaming and pay-per-views and all the other
Yeah.
shit. Podcasts.
Evan actually kind of stole my answer. I watch. That's why I only cover Dynamite, Raw, and oh my God, SmackDown was brutal. We covered SmackDown, and I was so happy we went to 2 hours. They're going back to 3 hours, and I'm wanting to smash my face because watching 3 hours of SmackDown is terrible. But I don't sleep. I've been having this. Like whenever I was a baby, an infant, the doctor told my mom that she needed to get away from me because I didn't sleep. And she cried to the doctor and said, the neighbors, no one will babysit for me because I would go 2 days without hardly any sleep. And to this day, I'm like this. They have tried everything on me. I have insomnia so bad. Most of my career is why I work all nights because of that. And so that's how, but because my wife does not like professional wrestling, and I cannot tell you how much I love my wife and how much of a sweetheart she is, because when I go to Fan Fest, she's with me. Doesn't like wrestling, but she's with me. When I go to these other events, she's with me. But I don't sit and make her watch wrestling because she's already supporting me. I couldn't do that to her. So we watch TV together. When she goes to bed at night, thank goodness for streaming networks that you can stream back these shows. That's whenever I watch it. And not to mention, not to say I don't watch wrestling from start to beginning without hitting the fast forward button, but you can almost guarantee if it's WWE, I'm hitting that fast forward button at some point. And sometimes even with AEW. AEW is so hit and miss at times. I don't, but to answer your question before I go off on something with AEW,
It's a time management thing. It's like it's so much stuff to
there's
get
so
through.
much on.
And then what about when AEW runs on Thursdays and you're trying to juggle at the same time with TNA? It's very difficult. TNA I can fast forward through X amount.
I don't watch TNA that much. Again, AEW and WWE is really the only wrestling content that I watch, just because as much as I love wrestling, I love my family more. So I watch enough for me to do the content of my podcast, and I enjoy it. And then the rest of the podcast is bringing in people from back in the day in professional wrestling. But my family comes first. So that means me not watching NXT or TNA or Collision, so be it.
Let me ask you quickly, Evan, I've never asked all the decades, a zillion decades I've known Evan, does your wife watch wrestling, or does she merely tolerate it because she loves you and she knows you like it, or will she sit down and watch with you?
It's somewhere in the middle. She's gone with me to wrestling. She's enjoyed it. Johnny Valiant and Lanny Poffo and Greg Valentine have all stayed here, and so she appreciates and respects wrestling because they're friends, or were friends, unfortunately.
And isn't your brother-in-law the Korean Brock Lesnar?
My brother-in-law is a famous Korean movie actor. He looks like Brock Lesnar. No, actually, he's in his 60s now. He really doesn't. But KG, I totally agree. I would be numb watching all that wrestling. I have no interest. Absolutely. I basically watch WWE and AEW pay-per-views. If I hear something else is just like off the charts great, I'll try to catch it, whether it's New Japan or TNA. But the only stuff I really watch regularly are AEW and WWE pay-per-views. Sometimes I do the No DQ podcast. They have me on as a guest, and I'll try to watch something just so I know what I'm talking about. But I have no interest in watching 3 hours. Let me give you an example.
Sure.
Okay, so Kevin Owens is wrestling CM Punk last week. I'm thinking this should be great, but I'm watching it, and 12 consecutive commercials mid-match where they shrink the picture of the wrestling and they're shouting about pizza, eat this pizza, and it totally takes you out of the match. And then everybody and his mother runs in, there's a screw job finish, and I go, that's absolutely everything I loathe about WWE in one match. Right there. Right there.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you about a couple of things. One, and this is what I'll talk about. So last Friday, I have not watched SmackDown in probably 2 weeks. Last Friday, my wife, we just moved from Minnesota to Florida.
Yeah.
After being in Minnesota for 23 years, the cold weather couldn't take it anymore.
Where in Florida are you?
We are in Citrus Springs, Florida. It's about an hour north of Orlando.
Yeah.
I was just in Orlando in July working on a book project. It was like 100 degrees every day with torrential downpours. It's like the opposite of Minnesota. That's not great either.
But again, I'm from Louisiana, born and raised there, right?
So you can
and I left Louisiana in my early 20s. I traveled around. I've lived in most places in the United States. I traveled around bartending. That's how I was able to see the United States. I love traveling. And then Minnesota, while I'm settling down, 3 kids, my amazing, beautiful wife. And my youngest graduated high school this year, and my wife and I have been talking about it forever. Moving to Florida. And not just moving to Florida, though. The reason why I chose Citrus Springs, I have no neighbors. I'm not a big people person, believe it or not. And people can't believe when they hear that about me because I bartended, ran bars for so long. I worked in sales after I retired from the bar business, exit sales guy. Not a people guy. I love the woods. I have 3 dogs. I run 5 miles every morning, and then I hike back. I do 10 miles 5 days a week. And people are like, "You doing that in this heat?" I guess you can't take that humidity out of that southern boy. I mean, once it's there, you kind of get back to it pretty quickly. But going back to your point, I should have, knowing that I was coming to this podcast, knowing that we were talking a bit about pro wrestling, I should have watched more, but I didn't. We were moving to Florida last week, a couple weeks ago, and then last night, or Friday night, myself, Robbie Idol, who used to wrestle for WCW, he's my co-host, and Robert Cook, Bob Cook's son, and his wife, and then my wife, we all went to the Marilyn Manson concert with Rob Zombie. And I gotta be honest with you, again, I love professional wrestling, but if I had to choose Friday Night SmackDown or go to that concert, well, again, I went to the concert, right?
Me too.
That's just again, not to constantly talk about my wife, but my wife loves country music. I like some country. I like the country music that's coming back from back in the 80s and 90s. It's gotten more bluesy than poppy today, right? Chris Stapleton, lovely guy, but she loves country music. She does not like Rob Zombie and that type of music. She was with me, smiling, having fun. So I have a great support system, and she's so supportive of the podcast. She's trying to constantly come up with ideas of maybe you should do this to grow it bigger. But yeah, but again, I get my SmackDown, man.
I'd like to make a point that you were alluding to, but I'd like to elaborate on it, and that is, it used to be that if you missed a week of a wrestling show, like Mid-South, for example, so much stuff was going on, and there was such a storyline. There were multiple storylines, and they were all fun to watch. They were all fascinating.
Yep.
Now, you feel like, oh, I missed SmackDown. I could just watch Raw, and I'll get whatever's on it.
Well, Bill Watts shows would end, and the match wouldn't even have a result. It's all breaking down. We got to go, folks, and you would want to tune in next week.
And you were always at the edge of your seat, and the bell was ringing, and you didn't know what was going to happen until you tuned in next week.
Russell, to your point, I never forget this, man. My mom and dad, I think it might have been their anniversary weekend or something. They were leaving town, and their friends were babysitting me and my little sister. I was young, maybe 9 or 10. And it was, I don't know what baseball team, but there was the playoffs, right, for baseball on a Saturday. And it went to overtime. During the time that Mid-South was on, I was so pissed off that I missed it. I kept on walking from the room that I was staying in to the living room to see the baseball game, and it wasn't over. I was so stinking mad that I literally, at 10 years old, thought about running away just because of that. Because exactly what you said, I knew how much I'd be missing.
And for you younger viewers, this was back in the day when most households had one television set. That's what most kids won't understand. They'll go, why didn't you just watch it on one of the other TVs? It's like, we only had one TV, or, maybe one downstairs and upstairs, depending on,
Mike,
on how your layout.
Yeah, and Mike, you're right.
So, but the thing is now... sorry.
No, it's much... Go ahead, Russell. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying now you don't feel that sense of like, if I miss a show here, I miss a show there, I can just wait till the pay-per-view happens and that'll fill me in on everything. You know, they have so much fluff before a match ever goes on. They fill you in on the entire storyline probably about 2 or 3 times. And sometimes, like with with like SummerSlam, they ran through the entire storyline of every particular match before the match started. So you weren't in the dark about anything that happened.
No, and that's the one point I want to bring up. I missed 2 weeks of SmackDown, right? When I watch SmackDown this coming week, I guarantee you I'll be able to catch up like that because, and AEW does the same thing. They're going to play what happened.
They don't do as good a job as
SmackDown.
WWE does an excellent job. You can't fault them for.
No,
they always assume Vince's thing. Well, somebody could be watching us for the first time. Well, let's do the recaps. They do recaps better than anybody, whether you like their shit or not.
But it's the cost of wrestling. That's the problem.
Where WWE beats AEW, and I will argue this with anybody all day long, is production. This past Wednesday night on Dynamite, their production, I don't know what was going on. I don't know if whoever the production was taking a nap or not, but there was a spot with Andrade in the ring when he first started cutting the promo against MJF, where you heard MJF cut in right away, and then they had to have to stop it because they started the video too early, and then they tried to sell it that MJF was there, via Satellite Live. No, he wasn't. That's where I felt AEW. They have, in the beginning, you're a little forgiving because, in the very beginning. But
the camera guys, their camera guys, sometimes they're not as well trained. They're seemingly not smartened up to where the announcers will cover up when there's like a massive amount of air. The person is not connected with the kick whatsoever. It's clear as day. The camera people should have been trained by now after all these years, 7 years of AEW, and yet the announcers will say, oh yeah, caught him right in the head. I'm just going, no, it was fucking 8 inches away. There was a complete, what did they used to call that in the old days? Light. Don't let any light show because you want the fans to believe what you're seeing is actual.
Right.
And there was so much light at times, not all the time, but enough to where the announcers should just keep their mouths shut and ignore it. KG, before I forget, can you go over, tell us some of the guys or your favorite guests, but some of the names you've had. It sounds like you've had a ton of great people on your show.
Magnum TA, he was like, I want to re-interview him because he was my very first guest. And remember what I said, a lot of bad habits. I've broken all those bad habits, but I go back and watch the interview, and honestly, I want to completely erase that interview because of how terrible I was. But I don't because this was Magnum TA. There's a lot of ums and ahs and your nose, and I've broken a lot of those habits. I don't say it as much, but Magnum TA was such a great guy. I also had, again, Baby Doll. I loved interviewing her. My very favorite interview, believe it or not, was DeMont.
Bill DeMont?
Bill DeMont. And I tell you why.
Hugh Morris.
A lot of times, my interviews, yes, it is about pro wrestling, but because it's a pro wrestling podcast, but I try to get away from that a little bit. I talk about real life shit, right? And a lot of these guys, it's like the camera goes on, even if it's a little nothing podcast like mine, you kind of tell they're in character a little bit. And so when you ask them questions and you want a legit answer, a lot of times they'll give you that wrestling answer. With Bill, man, he loved the fact that I was willing to talk about the stuff that we talked about. Matter of fact, he actually left me a review on my little Facebook page for the podcast because of the questions that he wants to come back on because of that. But my favorite interviews are with people who are willing to put their guard down and man, let's have a conversation. You're more than professional wrestling. You're a human with a story. And yes, professional wrestling is part of your story. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about Bill. Let's not talk about you. How many podcasts have you been on, Hugh Morris, that you've had the same questions asked over that all the fans have heard? Who's your favorite wrestler? When you started wrestling? I avoid that stuff. I want to talk about real stuff. I want to talk about what was your childhood like? What was your plan B? Did you have a plan B? What was your interest? Tell me about the real person. Each person I interview, I go and watch 3 or 4 of their interviews on other podcasts, and I actually write questions down for that podcast to make sure I don't ask those questions. Because I don't, someone laughed at me, a friend of mine, I told him, I want to be the Oprah Winfrey of professional wrestling interviews, right? I want to get the emotions and the real life stuff out there. I want to talk about stuff that maybe a fan will hear and might save their life. Maybe they're going through depression. Maybe that person that they look up to that's bigger than life back in the day or maybe currently, but because we're talking about real life stuff, maybe they're talking about they went through depression, they went through this. That one fan like, man, if they can get through it, I can get through it. That's where I'm trying to get my podcast to go to. Not so much about pro wrestling, but people who are in pro wrestling, and let's tell your real story. So, but yeah, Bill was definitely one of my favorites. Man, I've had so many people on that. I tell you what, the very first women's tag team champion, Princess Victoria from WWE, she was on.
Friend
and that
of the
was
show.
one of
She's a friend of the show here, so
yeah, I love her
we've had
because she was so open. We talked about depression. We talked about those type of things. I want to have her back on soon. But I think that if I had to say my number one favorite, it has to be her because of her willingness to open up about real life stuff.
She is uninhibited. That's for sure. Now, I'd like to roll up the sleeves a little bit now that I think we're on a friendly enough basis because
that's why KG's not sleeping. He's drinking Coca-Cola this late.
Okay.
Caffeine free, my man.
Oh,
okay.
Well, you never catch me drinking that stuff. I need the Diet Coke is a blood composition for me. But how you and I got acquainted was we were having this discussion on Evan's page.
Oh, was that you? I didn't know who I was talking to.
Yeah, that's me. And we were talking about you going to SummerSlam this year, and I wanted to have a discussion about it because what I was really talking about was the concept of funflation, and that with it comes a level of manipulation by corporate America to make you feel like you as a parent, because you and I, the one thing we have in common, we have kids. Evan and Mike do not. So they're not necessarily subjected to that kind of pressure of being like, are you going to be a good parent? Are you going to take your kid to WrestleMania, SummerSlam, fill in the blank, pay-per-view, premiere event? Are you going to, buy the souvenirs for your kids? Are they going to be great seats? Are you, you can't have you're not a great father and you didn't create memories for your kids because you didn't pay a lot of money to go to fill in the blank, Disneyland, SummerSlam, or Universal Studios. You just keep, whatever it is, that's the message. And I bristle to that because I feel like that's being, did we lose you, KG?
No, I'm here.
Okay. I bristle at that because I don't like feeling manipulated by a corporation to say the only way I can be a good parent is if I spend more than I can afford for one of these crazy
Russell,
papers.
let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
A couple of things that you said. Number one, no parent, no father, no mother should ever feel like they are a good or bad parent based upon the amount of money they spend on their kids, or if they take them to any type of a show, does that or whatever. That's not what makes you a good parent. Anybody can do that that can afford it, right? Being a good parent is about knowing knowing how to rear your children in a way that is going to impact them in a positive manner. Making sure you show up for them, making sure that you're setting that example for them. Let them know that as much as I love you right now, I'm not your friend. I'm your parent, right? If I get on you for something, this is why. So you have to have communication. If people think being a good parent is about how much money you spend on them, well, I can tell you that I have to question the type of parent they are to begin with, because parenting has nothing to do with that. And I'm glad we're going to talk about this. I've always said on social media, that's why I try to stay away from a lot of stuff. So I can't tell you how much I will comment and then just hit backspace and not post, because when you're trying to talk about things on social media, I can say it with a smile on my face, but you may take it as me being an asshole and vice versa. And that wasn't the situation. Versus when you can talk about it in person, you can kind of see the emotion and the attitude that, or lack of attitude that's going there. But see, I don't feel that, I've never felt that pressure that I had to take my kid to SummerSlam, to Disney, or anywhere else for me to be a good dad. The SummerSlam thing was honestly more about how I felt versus even my son, because he likes wrestling, but he's not a wrestling fan like I was as a kid. And my dad was my hero. And when my dad took me to a wrestling event, he had a smile on his face, and I know it made him feel good. I want to experience what my dad experienced, that feeling of taking your kid to something like that. Yep, I can take him to indie shows, and I do. I don't go to WWE events very often anymore because of the cost of what it goes, nor would I've ever paid $5,000 to go to a WWE event. I got for myself what was a good price, what I felt comfortable paying for both nights. So it was more of a bucket list for myself, because I've never been to SummerSlam. I have never been to WrestleMania. And even though I'm more of an AEW fan these days than WWE fan, I still wanted to experience that atmosphere of being there. And I'm glad I did. I had a great time. I know there's a lot of people who thought that it was, I talked about it, that it wasn't a good SummerSlam. I thought it was a really good SummerSlam. Maybe I thought it was better than other people because I was there living that experience, having fun, not just with my son or my wife, but having fun with the people around me that I made friends with. That so happened that I was there both nights as well, including this little kid that was 6 or 7 years old. So maybe that's why I viewed it differently than a lot of other people. But again, that to me, that's what SummerSlam was about for myself. It was checking that bucket list off, something that me and my dad has never been able to do together. I wanted to take my son because I wanted to know what my dad felt like when he was taking me to the Centroplex to watch professional wrestling, which was a big event back then.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
As a wrestling fan who's attended over 50 years, I first went in 1974. I just have some very basic requirements, like 1, being able to see the ring, 2, being able to see the wrestlers in the ring, 3, in a absolute worst case scenario, being able to see the screen. Now, I was told by many people that not this year, the previous WrestleMania, people were spending $300-400 in the nosebleeds, and they couldn't see anything, and they were watching it on their phones. I think at that point, you've been taken advantage of by a greedy, ruthless billion-dollar corporation. And I fully understand. We started the show with this. Dads taking their kids to wrestling. Believe me, I'm with you. I get it, and I respect it. But at some point, it's a ripoff. And I don't want to sit on a phone watching something that I'm at and spending $1,000 between the 2 tickets and the parking and the gimmicks and the food. I would rather go to 20 indie shows. I was at an indie show last night. You meet the wrestlers, you take pictures, you shake hands with them. One wrestler took a picture of me. I was flattered. That's how intimate the whole thing is.
Right.
And
I can tell you that. So a couple of things about what you said. We weren't in the nosebleeds per se. I wasn't near the ring by any means, but we weren't in the nosebleeds. And yeah, we were able to see the ring and see the wrestling. We were able to watch it on the screen better, obviously. I wouldn't have paid if we would have had to be in the nosebleeds. I would have bought tickets. I couldn't afford tickets to be down in the front row, obviously. Nor do I. I don't like sitting on the floor actually for wrestling events. Oh, sorry guys. There you go. I don't like sitting on the floor right near the ring. I've been there before. I've done it just because of you can really tell how exposed the business is at that point when you're that close, right? I don't use the F word. It's fake. Never have, because these guys, you don't get hurt when something's fake. But you can tell that it's what it is at that point. I usually like sitting at within not the back rows. The problem with what WWE and even AEW, this could be the problem as well, they just don't charge as much money, is I don't think professional wrestling should be done in these massive stadiums, because at a certain point you can't really see. The stadium is too big. A place like in Baton Rouge at the Citraplex, perfect place, because even if you're sitting in the nosebleeds, you can still see just fine. The Target Center in Minneapolis, good place to have it. I've been to a couple of Raws back in the day there, sitting in the nosebleeds. You can see
people need to complain to TKO if they don't like it, because TKO's WWE can't really do anything about it, sadly.
But this is the thing as well. It's not just professional wrestling. It's not just WWE, but the tickets has gone up. I mean, the fact that I was paying $8 for a Diet Pepsi, $6 for water at these stadiums is ridiculous. It's as a whole that people are getting taken advantage of. It's not with just WWE.
$50 for parking.
Yeah. Well, see, that right there I was able to control, because we parked about a half a mile away purposely, and I paid both nights $10 to park. One, I didn't want to deal with the traffic, and two, I wasn't paying. I've already paid. And look, I pay people here. Oh, you're at the SummerSlam, man. You must have money. No, I don't. We paid a total for 2 people each night, $250 per person. Right, that's $500 per night, $1,000 for the entire week. Right? Is that something I would do on a normal basis? Absolutely not. Would I do it for that one experience? I did. Would I go to another SummerSlam? I would not go to another SummerSlam. Will I go to a WrestleMania? Maybe, just to say, or not just to say, but to experience that. But again, it depends on the cost of the tickets. I do prefer supporting our local indie shows. Me and my wife, we do. We just went in Minnesota. Actually, I think it was 2 weeks before SummerSlam. There's a gentleman that he hosts Lucha Wrestling at this building in Minnesota, and this building is now getting torn down. So we have one live event there. It was absolutely great. You have so much fun. I have a better time at these events than these bigger events like WWE or even AEW, honestly. So yeah, I do support my indie guys, and that's where I go mostly. But again, I wanted to go to experience it just so I could say, I actually did this, and now I know for myself what's what. But again, people were paying. Look, it's none of my business. I don't go out and I don't work for these people. People make their own money. If someone wants to spend $5,000, $10,000 on a wrestling ticket, that's them. Do I think they're crazy? Yes, I would never do it. But I did what I could afford. When I felt that I was confident, I wasn't putting my family at risk of, how I'm going to pay my bills, right? So, and again, we get a great time.
KG, it's not that. It's that when you're watching, when you go to an indie show, you don't sit there thinking to yourself, am I getting $50 worth of entertainment here? You just go, you're happy to pay the money, no problem. But I would not be able to spend $1,000 for 2 nights without saying to myself, am I getting $1,000 worth of entertainment here?
See, but I don't think that way.
I can't be entertained by anything.
Right, and I respect that. That's you, and you think the way you think. See, my thought process is, I'm here with my family, one night my son, one night my wife, spending time with them, making memories. I'm around some great people, fan-wise, that I got to meet, having a great time. I am making memories with my family. Never once did I think, am I getting my money's worth? Because sharing that experience with my family, sharing that experience with new friends that I made, yes, that's what I cared about. It wasn't about, having to worry about whether or not I got my money's worth. Now, I get what you're saying. I think it's terrible when a kid's not able to go to an event because the tickets are so high. I think that's shitty. I feel bad for those parents. I might not be emotional or crying for movies, but I'm very empathetic. My wife and I, we had a nonprofit for almost 3 years, where we had people donating clothes to us, including dress clothes. People in need would come to us. The whole reason I started it was to help people find jobs. You feel better on job interviews when you can dress better, right? So I had people donating dress clothes. People would come to us to get some dress clothes, so we go to these interviews, they get jobs. I had made connections where I was trying to help people get jobs. So I get it, man. I can tell you a story right now about how giving people are who don't have a pot to piss in. There's this woman who contacted my wife and I when we were doing this. We were in Minnesota, we were running things out of our garage. It got so big that we had a massive 2-car garage. We couldn't even use it. It looked like a boutique in there. And a woman, and people would call us, and I would deliver. I would literally deliver clothes to people to their homes so that they didn't have to worry about, some people don't have vehicles. And there's this one woman that contacted us over Christmas, and she was like, my daughter just broke my heart because she asked, why do we even have a Christmas tree? We never have presents underneath it. So I got in touch with her, and I said, what would your kids like? Now, I'm thinking that she's going to say toys or whatnot. No. One of her daughters wanted her own bed to sleep in. The other daughter just wanted a family TV. The mom didn't want anything at all. Well, made a couple of phone calls. I had a store donate a bed. I had someone donate a TV. And then my wife and I went out and we spent our own money to buy the mom clothes and the kids, some fun stuff as well. We got there, we delivered everything, and this woman was in tears. But this is what really got me. That I'm like, wow, why I don't pay attention, or I try not to pay attention to social media and how shitty people are, because that's such a small percentage of the population. The world's not as bad as what people try to make you believe they're bad by reading the shit on social media. This woman who didn't have a pot to piss in, her cabinets were empty. This woman takes in teens who are homeless on the streets herself. She doesn't have anything, and she's taking people in. There's a lot more people out there that are doing those type of things than people who are shitty that you see on social media, right? So yes, it breaks my heart, and I feel bad for people who can't afford to take their kids to these things. And it's terrible that the ticket prices are where they're at. But it's not just WWE. It's most companies, unfortunately, these days. So
let's do something about it.
But that's what, as a
got a
society,
bit.
we have to figure out how we can create change.
Support your indies. I've got to go, but very quickly. KG,
Yeah.
you're a great guy. Want to dedicate the show to Shelley Fabre and ZZ Top drumming legend Frank Beard.
Yeah.
At an APW show, I was looking at my photos. The opener had these three now, well, one of them got booted out, Jeff Cobb, but these three superstars in WWE in the opener of APW, Jacob Fatu, Will Hobbs, who has that other name now, and Jeff Cobb, who was in My Family Tree. These guys were in the openers. What did they call him in WWE?
JC
Jeff Cobb?
Mateo.
Yeah, but you know why? Because he was living in San Mateo.
From San Mateo, yeah, they're very creative.
Jeff Cobb, San Mateo. Everybody, good night. Combate kurasai. Domo arigatou gozaimashite.
All right.
Good night.
But we're
Good
not.
night,
Yeah,
Mike.
we're not done with you, KG.
Yeah, that's fine.
Nice.
So you guys
That's
stay on.
Mike, next time bring your body, not just your head. Yeah.
So the question we have to ask ourselves is, instead of, and I'm guilty of it too, instead of talking about how expensive it is, what can we do to help cause change? Because look, I can tell you right now, Evan, you can moan and bitch. I can moan and bitch. Russell, you can moan and bitch about the ticket prices all we want. It's not going to change. TKO has made up their mind that they want to change their version of professional wrestling to what their UFC is and attract those type of people.
White collar, yeah, they don't want blue collar people anymore.
Now, I think that in 15 to 20 years, they're going to be sorry. It may be sooner because right now, they're not creating new fans. This is the problem. The fan base they have now, we know that they're paying money for it. They're going to pay these crazy prices. Again, I know you think what I paid was crazy. For me, it was affordable and I was comfortable. But again, I don't go to these events very often. We talked about this on our podcast. On Thursdays, we have the after recap discussion. After we do Wednesday Night Dynamite recap, we talk about hot topics on another episode. And we talked about this. And I said that WWE is not creating new fans. And because of this, I think in the next 15 years, if not sooner, that's when they're going to feel the heat for.
Yeah, I don't want them to wait 15 years. I want them to feel that now. You
have to be patient because we have to wait for the people who are buying these tickets, who are paying the $10,000, for them to get older and for this new generation to get older who will pay for these tickets.
I think
Not only are they not creating new fans, they're not creating new headliners.
No, I agree.
They got the same guys. They're all in their 40s. The big stars in WWE.
And when you look at who should be new stars like a Braun Breaker, but 2 full days of matches at SummerSlam, and Braun Breaker wasn't in any of them.
Right. Well, but there's a reason for that, though. Braun Breaker had gotten injured, and I read an article where he was talking about it, and he was supposed to be out past SummerSlam, but they didn't want him back too soon as far as him re-injuring himself, so that's why he did the run-in, and that's what I'm saying. A lot of times we're so quick to criticize about why did they do that. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes all the time. Yes, there are certainly a lot of times where the criticism is well-deserved, but sometimes we have to realize that, well, you know what? Braun Breaker was coming off with an injury. As much as we want to see him back, we don't want to put him at risk.
You could still involve him in an angle, though.
Well, you know what? He did that run-in.
Again, that looks cheap. It was not something that I think helped heighten what his angle is with the Fed.
Brother, we're not living in the Mid-South days anymore, though, unfortunately. We're not living in those days where when wrestling program went off the air, we could not wait for it to come back on the following week. I mean, as much as I love AEW, and I truly love AEW, even when Wednesday nights for AEW goes off the air, I'm not like, oh my God, I can't wait till next Wednesday. There's not that hook anymore. Now, give AEW this, though, and this is what I don't understand. Their pay-per-views, always fantastic, and there's so many times their pay-per-views end, and I'm like, I can't wait to Dynamite but then there's no follow through. I mean, even pay-per-views that on paper doesn't look like it'll be great. Forbidden Door was one of them. Forbidden Door on paper, I'm like, I'm not excited to watch this. I wasn't. And then I watched it, I'm like, this is why I got it, because they put on damn good pay-per-views all the... There's not been... I challenge anyone who is being sincere to name one bad pay-per-view AEW has put on since they've started. Or at least since I've been watching. I can't think of it.
I'm a big AEW fan, far more than WWE. I totally agree with you. Here's my point of contention, though, with AEW pay-per-views, and I've been to several of them. It's an endurance contest. You get there about 6:30 in the afternoon, after whatever your commute is. Then you have the pre-show. Then you have a 5-hour show. And unless something is truly great, you know, you're kind of numb after a while. I mean, it's almost like too much of a good thing.
I agree. That's why I do it smartly. Excuse me. I usually have a friend over for AEW pay-per-views, and I cook. Therefore, it's all about the company as well as the pay-per-view, so it's not. But, you know, another criticism about SummerSlam, going back to SummerSlam, that, you know, people were giving WWE shit about, and that I argued, I took over WWE, was this. They complained the time of SummerSlam. Let's start at daytime. Why wasn't that night? I get it, but this is the thing. If it would have been a regular nighttime PLE, by the time it was over with, it would have been midnight, people would have went home. The businesses in downtown Minneapolis, all of your restaurants and bars, they were able to reap that benefit because people were in a good mood, and it was early enough that people were going out to eat dinner. We walked half a mile past downtown, all these restaurants, right? They were packed. So now, do I think WWE did that for that reason? No. But at the same time, it doesn't matter why they did it. The fact that these local companies were able to reap the benefits, because you got to remember, your downtown areas, a lot of your local places, it's not your big chain corporations. So these local people were able to reap that benefit. But people were so quick to criticize, they don't think about those type of things. And I try to.
I just want to touch on this. The tribalism, you know, when people use words like hate, I hate so-and-so, I hate AEW, I hate WWE, I hate Tony Khan, I hate Dave Meltzer. Once you cross that line into hate, I think you've become obsessive, and I think it's great that KG and Russell, as two caring parents, can disagree on something,
but not
without 5 minutes later it turning into curses and name calling and.
No.
Look, this is the thing about this. I cannot sit and say, Russell, you're wrong for the way you feel, because those are his feelings. His feelings. I cannot tell him he's wrong about his feelings because his feelings are real to him. I was told a very long time ago that just because something may be done to you doesn't mean it's done to somebody else. If they feel that way, then that's their true feelings. Danhausen, I cannot stand watching him in a ring, right? And this actually happened to me at SummerSlam. Danhausen came out, and I started booing him. Boo! You know, but then I looked at two little kids in front of me. I had this other little kid on the side of me, and they both stared at me with this look on their face. And I'm like, I can't be this jackass. So I started cheering Danhausen, even though I didn't like him, because to these kids, that's what they like, and that's what's awesome about professional wrestling. Russell can feel the way he feels. Evan can. I can. And we're not wrong as far as what we like and don't like, because professional wrestling, out of our perspective, professional wrestling is not about one person. Now, sure, if someone says, well, WWE tickets are reasonably priced, well, no, you're wrong. Right? That is a matter of fact or not. $10,000 is not reasonably priced. Even $5,000 is not reasonably priced. Even $1,000. Notice also, I never said to you when we were having this conversation that those tickets were reasonably priced, because what's reasonably priced for me may not be for you or Evan or anybody else. And I wouldn't insult someone like that or make them feel bad because $1,000 for 2 nights is not reasonably priced. That was reasonably priced for me. But as a whole, if you said, KG, WWE tickets are outrageous, that's a fact, right? To me,
But
that
it's
is
the same
a
thing
fact.
if you wanted to go to a fancy restaurant and order a $200 steak. I mean, if you enjoyed the steak, then it was to you worth the $200. Now, I can't afford a $200 steak, every night when I go out. So, it just becomes something that's unobtainable. What bothers me, and it's not you, it's the product in general, is the unobtainability of the product, yet then selling it to the people who don't have the money and kind of giving that message like you missed out because you're too poor to afford this. Everybody else is making that sacrifice and putting it on their credit card. I mean, there's a number of people who are still paying off WrestleMania from this year on their credit card.
But let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, Russell.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? That's WWE. And look, if you go back to watch the podcast where we talk about these things, that's them, I agree, being greedy. But no one forced these people to do this. And if you're, to me, who's really the irresponsible one? If you're going to put something like a wrestling show on a credit card that you have to pay off 6-7 months later to pay on it, that's crazy, man. And to me, you have to look at your life.
It's not force, it's the manipulation. It's
right.
What I bristle at is not that it's forced, but it's that this multi-billion-dollar corporation spending its money to psychologically manipulate people into feeling they have to go and that they have to invest more than they can afford and put their futures in jeopardy. And it's, again, nothing to you. You have the money. You could do it. But
I don't have money, buddy. Like I said, that was a, you're talking about $200 steak. My wife will whip my ass if I ordered the $200 steak.
I understand, but it was something that was special.
Right.
It was a one-off, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the WWE is preying on people who are psychologically weak. I'm sorry to say this. And that they know they can wrench their arms and say, you got to go to this pay-per-view. You have to go. It's so important. You're not a good... And that there's this underlying message that you didn't fall prey to, but I think there's a lot of other people who are softer and easily manipulated. And the WWE is preying on those people more than they ever have before. When it was just blue-collar people and tickets were $30, then it wasn't a big deal for people to make that investment. Now they're going to those people, those same people that used to only be able to afford $30, and they're saying, you got to find a way to pay $2,000, $38,000, $70,000 for a seat at WrestleMania.
I get that, but again, I would have to look at that person and question their priorities. You know what I'm saying? I mean, look.
But the WWE knows these people are easily manipulated, and they're using that to their advantage. And that's
I get that, but that's everybody that's doing it. Look, Microsoft does it. Xbox or these gameplays, they all do it, and I agree that that's a problem. But again, you have to, at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own actions, and you have to question your priorities. If I have a family,
I'm not.
But,
you did, but I'm not seeing a lot of other people there. Yes,
but KG, the problem is I've had many people say to me, I have to look my kid in the eye and say, we can't afford to go to WWE anymore when they've been going for years. And it's almost humbling to a hardworking, honest father to say, son or daughter, I can't do this for you anymore. So WWE is kind of preying on that, Isn't that
life, Evan? Isn't that life, though? Look, to me, that is a teaching moment as well. There's been plenty of times that my kids want to do things that we couldn't afford. That's part of life. It's part of teaching your kids as well how to be responsible. Look, I know that you want this, whatever it is, but right now, what's more important? That you need more? Food electricity, water. To me, that is a teaching moment. That as a father, you have to be able to teach your children about that, because in life, there's very few people that can just afford to do whatever they want to do whenever they do it. That is not reality for most people. So you have to teach your kids this, because if you don't, if your kids see you breaking the bank for a stupid wrestling show or for a toy for them, not only are you risking your kids being entitled, but you're risking your kids repeating the same mistakes. And then they're going to let their family down when it counts. So to me, those are all teaching moments. And I'm not saying that WWE shouldn't be doing this, because they shouldn't be. I don't think any corporations should use manipulation, right? When you go to a freaking, do you know when you go to, I'm sure you guys know this, you guys are both smart. When you go to a casino, do you know, I used to be a food and beverage manager for a casino, so it was for a fact. They play, the music they play, it's not just music. The music they're playing, they've tested, and it makes people drink more, and drinking more makes you gamble more, right? I've been in the meetings, I've listened to it. That's what, I think all of that's terrible. But at some point, you have to realize that the world, unfortunately, we're living in right now, and until we figure out a way to stop this shit, you gotta be smarter than them. And especially when it comes to your kids, you have to be able to rear your children to be prepared for this type of stuff so they don't fall for it. And Evan, to your point, again, I think it's shitty. I know what it feels like to tell your kids, no, we can't afford it. It's a terrible feeling, because you want to give your kids everything. But again, you have to turn that to a teachable moment, oh man.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just find it's almost reached a point with many young people, they're corporate apologists.
Absolutely.
They all do it. That doesn't make it right.
I agree. I think today's generation, a lot, not all, but I see it all the time. They're a slave to the master, who is the corporate person. Regardless if it's working or throwing their money, they do it unapologetically, and they do it without asking questions. And I couldn't do it. That's why I never worked for corporate. I'd be fired. I tell you right now, I'd be fired in 30 seconds if I had a corporate job, because I'm the guy that would tell you to kiss my ass. I don't kiss
like
my
that
ass, and I don't take no bullshit, right?
Yeah,
so
I don't
again,
like that at corporate HQ.
Right. So again, I agree with you guys. I do. It's not that I disagree, but at the same time, as a society, we also have to start taking responsibilities. And the only way shit's going to change is if we get smarter.
There you go.
So we're out of time, guys. I mean, we could easily go like another half hour on this subject. I find it fascinating, and I do really appreciate the civility in which you approach this, KG. And
we didn't kill each other.
Yeah. So I'd like you to plug your program here and social media, and let anyone know how they can get a hold of you. And we'll have you on in a future show. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. You guys are great. I thank you. First, thank you both so much. I want both of you guys to be on our podcast now that I'm back in Florida.
My policy is, as soon as you run out of guests, absolutely all your guests, anyway, you're totally out of guests, then you can have me on your show.
We'll do. But you guys, you can catch my shows. My regular shows are on Tuesdays. We cover Monday Night Raw. Thursdays, we do AEW Dynamite. And then after that, we take a break for 5 minutes, and then we have the after recap discussion, talk about the hot topics going on. And then Fridays, immediately after SmackDown, we do SmackDown as well. It's myself, Robbie Idol, WCW veteran, as well as the Grizzled Vet. He's on with us on Thursdays and Fridays. Robbie's with me every show. And then I have interviews. Most interviews are done on Mondays. I've been having a couple here on Wednesdays and occasionally on Fridays. But you can find us on YouTube. Just get your bell rung. Pro Wrestling Podcast. Again, Pro Wrestling Podcast, after you get your bell rung, is very important, or else you're going to be talking football.
And
we can talk about that too.
I just want to give a shout out to Michael McCurdy from your show. He's a good guy. He just got out of the hospital. Very supportive guy, and I'm glad he's feeling better. And check out my show, The Evan Ginsberg Show, on Wrestling with the 80s, Blair Cody's YouTube channel. And yours truly, the senior editor at ProWrestlingStories.com. And we have 1,000 or so pieces on the rich history of pro wrestling. I wrote about 100 of them, and there's some great autographed 8x10s and merchandise on there you could check out as well. And none of it will cost you $37,500 like Row 2 at WrestleMania last year.
And if I can, let me add this too. On our podcast, especially when we're doing recaps, guys, I don't do the whole super chat thing where it costs you money. No, I don't believe in that because it's the fans that makes the show. So we read all of your comments if I can get to everybody on time, depending on how busy you are. But I don't do super chats. So you comment, we get to it, we'll talk to you about it.
I don't either. I don't even know how to. I'm not a techie, but yeah.
We'll talk about that later. Anyway, KG, thank you so much for being on the show. Looking forward to having you in the future. Everyone, see y'all next week.
Appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Evan.
Thanks, KG.
Bye-bye.